You meet someone new at a party,
There's music, people talking. You're holding a drink, just looking around.
and you're not really sure where to stand.
Then someone walks up to you.
They smile. Hi, nice to meet you.
You smile back. Nice to meet you too.
And for a moment, it actually feels okay.
Yes, it's easy.
But then they ask, so what do you do?
And something changes.
You know the answer, but suddenly it doesn't feel easy to say.
You try to keep it simple. You say something short.
Something safe.
And then you stop.
Again.
And the moment gets quiet.
Not really awkward, but not really flowing either.
You feel it, like something is missing. Like the conversation could go somewhere.
But it doesn't.
And you think, I know this.
I've had this moment before.
So what can you say next?
When you meet someone new.
That moment at a party, it's interesting because at the beginning, everything actually feels quite easy. You say something simple, you smile, and for a second you think, okay, this is going well. Nothing feels difficult yet. It's just a normal moment between two people. But then something changes. Not outside, inside. You suddenly start thinking more about your words, your sentences, what you should say next. And that's usually the moment where everything slows down a little.
Yes, and it's such a strange feeling because nothing really changed. The other person is still friendly, still smiling, but inside it feels different. You go from just talking to thinking about talking, and that's where it becomes harder.
Exactly. And the more you think, the slower it gets. You take a bit more time, your answers become shorter, safer, and sometimes you stop too early.
Yes, that's exactly it. You stop too early. And I didn't really notice that before. I always thought the problem was what I said, but it wasn't that. It was where I stopped.
That's such an important point.
I actually had this moment recently, and it stayed in my head because everything was fine, but it still didn't feel good.
What happened?
It was a small event, nothing big, just a few people. I didn't really know anyone, so I was doing that thing where you look around, smile a little, and try to look comfortable.
Yes, trying to look like you belong there.
Exactly. And then someone came up to me. Very normal, very friendly. They said, "Hi, nice to meet you." And I felt okay. I smiled, I said, "Nice to meet you too." And for a moment, I thought, okay, this is easy. Then they asked, "So, what do you do?"
Simple question.
Very simple, and I knew the answer immediately. That wasn't the problem. But I said, "I work in marketing." And then I stopped.
Nothing after that.
No. And that was the moment where everything changed a little. It wasn't awkward, but it felt empty, like the sentence didn't go anywhere.
Yes, there was nothing to continue.
Exactly. The other person had to do the work again. They had to ask another question, and you could feel that it became a bit less natural.
And your English was completely fine.
Yes, that's what I realized later. I didn't need better English. I just needed one more small thing.
That's such a small change.
But it changes everything, because if I had said, "I work in marketing, mostly with small brands," suddenly the situation feels different. Now there is something to react to.
Now the conversation has a direction.
Yes, now the other person can ask something or share something, and you're both inside the conversation, not just starting it again and again.
And that's really the moment we want. Not something perfect, just something that can continue.
Yes, continue is the key.
So maybe instead of thinking, what should I say next, it's easier to think, how can I keep this going just a little?
That already feels much easier.
And it is easier because you don't need something new, you just extend what you already said.
Yes, just one small extra piece.
Exactly, one small detail.
Let's try that with a few examples. If someone asks, "What do you do?" you can say, "I work in marketing. I just started a new job." Or, "I work in marketing. I mostly work with small companies."
And both feel open.
Yes, because now the other person doesn't have to think too much. They can react naturally.
And that's what a good conversation feels like.
Not forced, just moving.
And I think that's something many people don't see. They focus on saying the right thing, but conversations aren't really about that.
No, they're about making it easy to continue.
Exactly.
And when you see it like that, it feels lighter. You don't need to impress anyone. You don't need something special.
just something real, and a little bit more of it.
And something else happens when you do that.
What?
You stay in the moment.
Yes, that's true.
Because when you stop after one short sentence, it's like you step out for a second. You wait, you think, you lose the flow.
But when you add that small detail,
You stay inside.
and staying inside feels much better,
Yes, it feels more natural.
and also more relaxed.
I noticed that too. When I add just a little more, I don't feel like I have to carry the whole conversation anymore.
Because now it's shared.
Exactly.
And that's what conversations really are.
Shared moments, not performances.
And this doesn't only work when you talk about your job.
No, you can also talk about the situation.
For example, at a party.
You can say, "It's my first time here."
Or, this place is really nice.
Very simple.
But it opens something.
Yes, now the other person can respond easily,
And again, the conversation moves.
without effort.
Without pressure.
But then there's still that moment sometimes.
Yes,
Even when you say something, even when you add a detail,
there's still a small pause again.
and you feel it.
And you think,
Okay, what now?
And I think this is the moment where something changes a little. Because once the conversation is moving, even just a bit, it doesn't feel so heavy anymore. You're not standing there trying to start something from nothing. Now there is already something between you, something you can react to.
yes, and that's a very different feeling. At the beginning, it feels like you have to create everything. But once it starts, you don't create anymore. You just follow.
Exactly. And following is much easier.
Much more natural.
But then there's still that moment where people stop again.
Yes, even after a good start.
You say something, maybe even add a small detail, and then you wait.
And that second pause feels stronger.
Because now you felt the conversation moving, and then it slows down again.
So instead of thinking about starting again, it's more about keeping it moving.
Yes, like not letting it drop.
So what can you actually do in that moment?
For me, it helped to think of it as a small exchange. Not just saying something, but giving it back.
Giving it back?
Yes, like you say something about yourself, and then you turn it back to the other person.
Oh, so it doesn't stay only with you.
Exactly. Because if it stays only with you, it feels a bit heavy. But if it goes back and forth, it feels lighter.
More balanced.
Yes, much more natural.
So how would that sound in a real situation?
Let's take the same question again. Someone asks, "What do you do?" You say, "I work in marketing, mostly with small companies." And then you don't stop. You just add something small, like, "What about you?"
Very simple.
Yes, but it changes the whole moment.
Because now the other person knows exactly what to do.
Yes, they don't have to think about their next step.
And that makes everything easier.
For both people.
And I think many people hesitate here because they feel like they need a good question.
Yes, something interesting or smart.
But in real conversations, that's not how it works.
No, most questions are actually very simple.
Very short.
What about you is enough.
And you is enough.
Even that small question keeps the conversation alive.
And it feels completely natural.
Because that's how people really speak.
Yes, not in perfect sentences, just in small exchanges.
And that's actually good news.
Very good news.
Because it means you don't need something new every time.
You can use the same small questions again and again.
And it still feels normal.
Exactly.
I noticed this myself after that situation I told you about. A few days later, I was in a similar moment. Different people, different place, but the same feeling at the beginning.
And did you do something differently?
Yes, just one small thing.
What was it?
I didn't stop after my answer.
You stayed in it.
Yes, someone asked me again, "What do you do?" And this time I said, "I work in marketing, mostly with small brands. What about you?"
That already feels more open.
Yes, immediately, because now it wasn't just about me anymore.
It became shared.
Exactly, and the other person answered right away. No pause, no thinking, just a natural response.
And that probably changed how it felt for you.
Completely. I felt much more relaxed. I didn't feel like I had to carry the conversation anymore.
Because now both of you were incited.
Yes, and that makes such a difference.
And it's interesting how something so small can change the whole dynamic.
Yes, it's not a big technique.
Just a small shift.
And I think that also helps with the feeling in your head.
What do you mean?
When you ask something back, your focus changes. You're not only thinking about your English anymore.
You're thinking about the other person.
Exactly. And that makes you more relaxed.
Because you're not watching yourself all the time.
Yes, you're part of the conversation, not outside of it.
And that's when it starts to feel real.
Not perfect, but real.
And that's enough.
But even then, there's still that moment sometimes.
Yes.
Even when everything was going well, you said something, you asked something, and then suddenly,
It slows down again.
yes, and you feel it immediately.
That small pause.
And you think, okay, what now?
And even if nothing is wrong,
It still feels a bit uncomfortable.
because you don't know what comes next.
Exactly.
So what do you do?
When the conversation slows down again.
That's the moment where many people feel like something went wrong, even if everything before was actually good.
Yes, you had a nice start. You said something, you asked something, and still there is that small pause again.
And it feels bigger than it really is,
Exactly. It feels like you have to fix it.
like it's your responsibility.
And that's when you start thinking again.
And once you start thinking, everything slows down.
Yes, that same feeling from the beginning comes back.
But maybe this moment is not a problem at all.
No, I don't think it is.
It's just part of how conversations move.
They don't go in a straight line.
They start, they move, they slow down, and then they move again.
But in that slow moment, it feels like you have to do something.
And sometimes you don't need to do much.
Yes, just something small.
Not something new, just something that opens the moment again.
Like a small door.
Exactly.
I had a moment like this recently.
Another one?
Yes, and this time I noticed it very clearly. The conversation was going well, we talked a little, asked each other a few things, and then suddenly there was that pause.
That moment again.
Yes, and I felt it immediately, that small second where everything becomes quiet and you think, okay, now I need to say something.
And what did you do?
This time, I didn't try to think of something good.
That's already different.
Yes, I just said something very simple. I looked around and said, so, how do you know this place?
Very natural.
Yes, and it worked immediately. The other person smiled and started talking, and just like that, the conversation was moving again.
Without effort.
Exactly. And that's what surprised me. It didn't need to be clever. It just needed to be something real.
Something connected to the moment.
Yes.
And I think that changes how you see these pauses.
How?
Before, the pause feels like a mistake.
Like something went wrong.
But now, it's just a small space.
And you can step back into it.
Exactly.
And that makes you feel much more relaxed.
Because you know you don't have to escape.
You can stay.
And staying changes everything.
Yes, because many people feel that pause and then they try to end the conversation too early.
They leave the moment.
Exactly. They say something like, nice meeting you, even though the conversation could continue.
And that's the moment where something is lost.
Yes, because often the conversation was just about to become easier.
After the first few sentences, after that first nervous part.
That's when it starts to feel more natural,
More relaxed.
more like a real conversation,
But you only get there.
if you stay a little longer.
And sometimes staying is very simple.
Just one small sentence.
Or one small question.
Nothing big.
But enough to keep it going.
And once you feel that a few times,
It changes how you see these situations.
yes, you don't feel stuck anymore,
You feel like you have options.
even in a quiet moment.
Exactly.
And I think that's a really nice feeling, especially when you meet someone new.
Yes, because those first moments can feel the most difficult.
You don't know the person.
You don't know what to say.
But now, it feels a bit different.
A bit easier.
Because you don't need something perfect.
Just something small and real.
And a little bit more of it.
So next time you meet someone,
Just stay in that moment a little longer.
say one more thing
Or ask one small question.
and see where it goes.
We'll talk again very soon.
Take care.
And enjoy your English. Thanks so much for spending time with us today.
We hope you enjoyed this episode and learned something new without even noticing it.
If you like the English Adventure podcast, make sure to follow us and listen to more episodes.
And remember,
You don't need to be perfect to speak English.
you just need to start.
See you in the next English adventure.